Good morning, everybody. It is episode 10 of Gaslighting the Warfighter. Welcome back. Welcome back. You got Tim Jensen here and one of my favorite people, Rosie Torres, the executive director of Burn Pits 360. How you been, Rosie? Welcome back.
Working.
Yeah.
Just the same thing, right? Plugging away at the issue and continuing to just advocate.
Yeah.
It's a very critical time right now in the space of toxic exposure. So.
I think so. I mean, we've seen a lot of activity in especially the last 30 days since our last get together. We've got the SVAC bill that has been that came out of Congress, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show. And you got the VA, talking about acknowledging a few more presumptions here in the next couple weeks.
Right.
So that is exciting.
Oh yeah.
So I think what is happening, Rosie, and what I'm especially excited about is people are listening. Right. The message is starting to get out.
Right.
People are becoming educated on the situation, and I think a lot of that success has to do with you, right? and your discipline and your desire to make sure that this problem is solved, right? So congratulations. This is unfortunately it's one of those situations that it's the double-edged sword, right? That we shouldn't have to be doing this.
Right.
But here we are, right? And, you're one of those individuals that said, if not me, then who, right? So great stuff there. So we got a really interesting episode for you today. We got a couple subjects to talk about. We're going to do some comparison of the SVAC and the HVAC bills that are currently circulating out on Congress.
Right.
That's going to be very interesting because, I think, again, when it comes to bills and things that are up there, it's all gobbledygook.
It is.
Right?
It is. It sounds like the Peanuts, right? Cartoon where that one character is just...
Yeah, absolutely. So we got a couple things that we want to go over and kind of get you guys up to speed on what's the difference between the two bills, right? Because I know that you get a lot of calls. We get a lot of calls and emails and interactions of people that are comparing, that are talking about one thing, but referring to another, right?
Right.
And and I do want to make especially clear, right, that there's we have an opinion on what bill we think is better, but at the end of the day, the conversation that is being had is something's going to get passed, so we're going to get something done, right? It's just a matter of what is it going to look like. That is the topic of debate right now.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to make that especially clear. I think all the work that's being done on both sides of the issues here. And basically, it does come down to healthcare versus a presumption, and what that looks like, or more research versus more presumption.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we have a great guest with us today, Susan Zeier. You might have seen this lovely lady as we've been up on Capitol Hill. There's one particular interaction where she. It was passionately expressing some words towards a congressperson, and man, that exploded into something wildly different. I never thought I would see a congressional person, speaking down to a constituent.
Right, that's right.
In the way that happened. And there's an interesting story there that we want to share with you. And really bring some life to the situation that's happening, right? 'Cause, her family has experienced some really devastating outcomes to this situation.
Right. Yeah. Susan's a fierce, relentless advocate that has really, stood in the gap for her family.
Yeah.
And she inspires me every day, right? And she is Burn Pits 360. You are, I am, all of us. It's not Rosie and Leroy. It's these families that have been impacted. And I just admire her tenacity, to go out there and stand there on the Hill, alongside us, with us. I'm so honored to see her join us today.
Yeah. And what's been interesting, even during COVID, that group seems to be getting bigger and bigger every time we end up going up to the Hill, right? It goes back to some of those accomplishments of getting the message out, right?
Yeah.
But even so much so during the COVID situation and how Washington has been, pretty much shut down.
Right.
Right. The relentlessness of the group to continue to go up there and
Amazing.
beat on the doors, get the people up to speed on the situation.
Right.
It's been rather, I don't know what the right
You
word.
don't. There really aren't any words, Tim. Like we just did a Harvard University DAV panel where my role on the panel was to explain my experience as a military wife.
Yeah.
But I don't. That term is could mean 100 different things to me. But what I explained to the panel and really to America, right, for them to understand that we built a space that's not traditional in the veterans world of advocacy,
Right.
because these are, we're not the big six, right? We are families impacted. We're veterans, reservists, active duty, people impacted by the issue of toxic exposure. And by bringing in the 9/11 community and going to a veteran entrepreneur such as yourself, and then expanding that into building relationships and building an alliance with other ambassadors, it's never been done.
Right.
The script has always been written by the VSOs in Washington. They have determined what bills they feel, in their opinion, are important, and we have flipped the script.
Yeah. Yeah. And, interestingly enough, right, it goes beyond just the narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the things that you're doing and, and what the foundation, has been inspired by in your work. And that's finding alternative modalities, right, to serve this community that is being denied, healthcare through the VA system, right?
Right.
I'm proud to say that the Grunt Style Foundation is working with Burn Pits 360 in delivering 12 hyperbaric oxygen therapy chambers to 12 veterans this year, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to change a lot of things for these 12 individuals, right? It's with that type of research that is showing positive results, especially in the realm of CTE and NFL players, right? It's showing positive results in their therapies. And the same is being transferred into the veterans that are suffering from severe TBI,
Yeah.
and some of these other soft tissue damages that are happening to within our community. So that I think is the story here is and I brought this up when I was sitting with the deputy director of the VA, and I was graciously invited to that conference by the Wounded Warrior Project. And that was a great sit down, right? And
Yeah.
and one of the things I said to the deputy secretary, Donald Remy, incredible individual, and I think he's honestly out there trying to listen and bring something back to the VA, right?
Right.
But the conversation was, one, we don't see the VA out there advocating on behalf of the veteran. Right? They're not. We don't see the VA going up to Capitol Hill saying, "Here's the things that we're seeing. We need to get laws passed for that."
Right.
They're
Right.
reactive, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing, is the conversation of toxic exposure wasn't even in their top 3 priorities for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, are you guys that out of touch?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And then we're dealing with an antiquated system that is built for the Vietnam era veterans, right? And and I'll give the VA a lot of credit for trying to get up to speed and bring newer technologies forward, but it's the bureaucracy that is still 40 years behind, right? And it's it's not helping the GWAT veteran, right?
No, I mean, there has to be pressure. And I think we've done a great job in putting pressure. So much so that, like you mentioned to me earlier, that there will be an announcement of some new presumptions. And we know that, they've been talking about it since last year.
Yeah.
Or actually this past Veterans Day, right?
Right. And they've currently, I don't think conceded is the right word, right?
Right.
But it does feel like it's a bit of a war between the community and the administrators of our healthcare that are in that system. But they've given up, or they've given presumption to rhinitis, sinusitis, and asthma, right? 3 situations that are fairly common with toxic exposure. Great.
Right, right.
What do you think do you have any idea or suspicion of what the next batch of presumptions would look like?
I mean, I've sat in on some with the White House Veterans Liaison, Chris Diaz, who's done a fair job of communicating to the VSO community on what those next steps are. But it's been mentioned by Dr. Patricia Hastings and himself that possibly constrictive bronchiolitis, possibly, right? And that's a no-brainer. I mean, we've handed over tons of research by our scientific advisory board, Dr. Miller, Dr. Coughlin, Dr. Zema, who've done an amazing job in conducting research and publishing those findings, right? So they've had recommendations from doctors over at National Jewish to add that as a compensable disease, right? In that list of CFRs. And I'm talking a little bit foreign language here for the audience, right? Because a lot of people don't know. But yeah, I suspect possibly that, and I have no idea on anything else, Tim. Like, it'll be a surprise to me too. Right
on. Yeah, but hey, and this is something I think that's important, right? We have to acknowledge the wins, right? And we have to acknowledge the work that is being done on the government side of it, right? Where the VA is, this is now a conversation. How we got here, right? Probably a lot of pressure that has forced them to really do this work, right? But things are happening, and we gotta at least say, hey, this is workable, and we acknowledge that you guys are identifying this as change, but let's do better, right?
Right.
And here's what better looks like,
right?
And that's why I think what better looks like is HR 3967, right? And that bill and the presumptions that come along with that. I think we have a list. If there's a few that you want to touch on that you think are probably the priority items that we need to be discussing when it comes to this bill passage.
Yeah. I mean, there's, I have some notes here, of course, because it's an extensive piece of legislation.
Yeah.
But the PACT Act, I mean, off the top of my head, I know there's lots of cancers, constrictive bronchiolitis. A lot of the data that we handed over through our own registry is reflected on in this bill. Right. So it's basically the Warfighter bill, but that was now like renamed into the PACT Act, which Chairman Takano so graciously, led that effort along with Congressman Ruiz and Congressman.
Yeah, so it's amalgamation of a few bills
of Warfighter. Yeah. And I mean, I think I said it on our Facebook Live yesterday. I said in the beginning there was 2 bills, burn pit bills, and I know with our audience watching, there's that confusion because now there's like, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it feels like 100, right, are out there on the table. But these 2 right here, this is it. Like, this is the time. Right.
Yeah. I mean, we have to. I think there is some motivation up in the hill to get it done, right? So, again, we've been saying this ever since the beginning to all of you guys listening.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't have a voice in this, we are going to get an abortion of something that is not anything close to what we wanted. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, you have to get in the trenches to create change, and that's exactly what the veterans have done here. Like, this is a result of the advocates, of the families, of the organizations, of Grunt Style podcasts, of people going out and using social media as a tool to tell and hold their members accountable to create change. And
absolutely. I mean,
we're here today because of it.
Yeah, 100%. It is. I would say 3967 is the people's bill, right? When it comes to the community's bill, when it's come to this, because it is
absolutely
it is a grassroots organization. So much so that that's what piqued the interest of John, of saying, "Wow, this is something that's happening. This is not being led by politicians. It's not being led by bureaucrats. It's not being led by VSOs, right? This is being led by families.
That's right.
That are being destroyed because of this situation."
A repeat of what he went through as their sort of ambassador, friend, advocate during 9/11.
Yeah.
I mean, total repeat. I can't imagine, the feelings it's brought up for John and John.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Right. And they talk about that a lot, and they've been so gracious in their sharing of that playbook, right?
Yeah.
it's really pushed this conversation to the national front, right? To almost a dinner table conversation, if you will.
I love watching it. I mean, I love watching the pressure that and watching Congress, pushed up against a wall,
Yeah,
kind of trying to adjust themselves a little bit like,
yeah.
ooh,
And
we don't like being pressured.
Right, right. And I was trying to, and I think I was as respectful as I could have been when in this conversation, right? And one, I didn't want to disrespect the opportunity of being invited into this conversation, right?
Right.
And I wanted to get my point across in a very clear but powerful way. And it was tough, right? But I think in the conversation we had with Honorable Remy was well received, right? And we covered I have some notes here, several different things.
And I know, Tim, I think while you look at your notes, I just want to say to the audience that please know that like this is not partisan.
Right.
This is not Republican. This is not Democrat. Although we know facts are that we've had more support from the Dems, but they know in Congress that this is a red, white, and blue issue, as someone put it.
Right.
Right. It's not about party. People are dying.
Right. Yeah. And the one of the ways that we've been able to get this across was by educating our audience, right? Through this podcast, through inserts that we're sending out with all of our orders, that was getting people familiar with the subject.
Amazing,
right? And that was something I said to the deputy, right? The deputy secretary was, hey, it's like if a private industry, right? I have no responsibility. Grunt Style has no responsibility in this conversation, right? Other than the moral implications of being one that's affected and being one that is, friends to left and right that are dying from it. Right? But we invested a considerable amount of money to make sure that our audience was educated, and we're still doing that today. Right? Why isn't the VA doing that? Right? Why isn't the VA sending information out to the 3.5 million veterans on a consistent basis, saying, hey, if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, here's some of the questions you should be asking your primary care provider or the individuals within our system. Right? Ask these questions, and you can get closer to your resolution, because there is enough data that exists today that we can at least be telling our the community what questions to be asking their primary care providers. Why, at the very least, why aren't we doing that? And I think that was well received. I think he really took that and said, you know what, that's something that's thinking outside the box that we haven't done yet, right? And I was like, well, I know, because I get letters from you guys every month about, hey, I got to get my COVID shot or this, that, and the other, but I don't get anything that's talking to me about exactly the some of the issues that are impacting us, right? Because I'm on a list. They should flag everybody on the list and send them information on the list.
That's right. Yeah.
Come on.
It doesn't
hurt.
hurt.
It's the 21st century.
Yeah. And instead, if companies such as yours, patriotic company here for the people, carrying them on your backs, the government, instead of them doing their job.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Right. I mean, they get millions and millions of our tax dollars. Right.
Yeah.
So, but I think at this point, I think it'd be a good time to bring in Susan.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And tell, and share her story. Susan, welcome. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hi, Jim, and hi, Rosie.
Hey, Susan.
Last time we saw each other, we were up on Capitol Hill together. It seems like almost yesterday, but it's almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, time flies.
Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, and how has this illness, this toxic exposure, affected you and your family?
Well, I am the mother-in-law of a soldier who served in Iraq, Camp Liberty, Camp Victory to be exact, and his name is Heath Robinson. He served in 2006 to 2007 with the Ohio Army National Guard as a combat medic, and returned home safe and sound, didn't have any problems, physically fit, ran half marathons for almost 10 years after returning. And he stayed in the Guard and was employed by the National Guard, so he was still considered an active duty soldier. And he presented with gushing nosebleeds suddenly in late 2016. And that led on to he started bleeding from his ears. And he saw over a dozen doctors, and they couldn't come up with any answers. Everyone was baffled. And there was one ENT who had seen this rare autoimmune disease in an elderly woman before, and he finally diagnosed it with a mucous membrane autoimmune disease called mucous membrane pemphigoid. And it was extremely rare in men, only strikes elderly women, and they didn't know of any case of a 35-year-old healthy man. So it was treatable. We were optimistic that, something you're going to live with now. And a month after that, he presented with new symptoms not related to the autoimmune disease, and his lymph nodes in his neck swelled up and almost cut off his airway. They almost had to trach him. And that led to biopsies, which led to a diagnosis of lung cancer. And it wasn't typical lung cancer. It was extremely rare form of lung cancer. And his oncologist actually, the first words out of his mouth when he was given them, he and Danielle, the diagnosis was, "What the hell have you been exposed to?" And he was given just a few weeks or a couple months to live. And that was March of 2017. Well, they found an immunotherapy that ended up working, and his life was extended for 3 years. So Heath was active duty because of that. His care was outstanding. His captain in the National Guard at the time was just phenomenal. They took care of everything for him, sent his members of his unit over to cut the grass, cook lunch. I mean, I was down there and I had 6 soldiers in uniform cooking us lunch, and they wouldn't even let me do the dishes. They cleaned up, and there were periods of time when Heath would be so dehydrated, Danielle would have to rush him to the emergency room for IVs, and then go back home, and then a few hours later go back. So captain sent one of the medics with IV supplies, and they'd hydrate him right there in his living room. And so from that aspect, we had wonderful support from the military. And and I know a lot of the soldiers don't have that because they've long been discharged. So moving forward to 2.5 years of him being somewhat stable, being in emergency dire situations, in and out of hospitals, lots of treatments, sometimes feeling kind of good and like he's feeling like he was going to beat it, even though he knew deep down he never was. But he was finally retired in November 2019, on Veterans Day to be exact. And so he was medically separated, and at that time his health was declining fast, and the immunotherapy seemed to no longer be working, and he needed pretty much 24-hour round-the-clock care. So my daughter is a full-time job. She's a doctor of physical therapy, and obviously having a 5-year-old daughter and an incapacitated husband, it was difficult for her to manage the household, care for him, care for Riel. So I moved in with them. I live about 120 miles away from them. So these 2.5-hour drives there at a moment's notice when she needed me got too difficult. So I just told my husband I need to go and just be there. So I lived with them for about 8 months and helped take care of them. Heath and Danielle were advised to apply for the VA's comprehensive caregiver benefits so that Danielle could take an unpaid leave from work and be compensated. Well, they were denied. And Heath's lung cancer was 100% service connected. And his medical separation was, he was, a disabled combat veteran. And the reason the VA gave for the denial was he did not prove his lung cancer was connected to burn pits or combat, even though it was 100% service connected. So they denied him. So Danielle ended up taking an unpaid leave from work. Even with me helping, I couldn't do it. His daily routine was gushing nosebleeds while puking, and his oxygen tube obviously couldn't be in his nose. So we would hold stainless steel bowl and catch the blood and vomit and try to shove the oxygen tube in his mouth so he didn't die on us. And there were days Danielle would pass out or collapse because of exhaustion and stress. And I've got her unconscious on the floor. I've got him bleeding and throwing up, and I'm trying to hold the oxygen in his mouth. And when he had to bathe, we had to put chairs every 10 feet, including the landing of their stairway, and to get him to the bathroom. It was about a 25-minute process, because even with the oxygen, his blood ox would drop to like 70% if he moved 10 feet. And so he'd have to sit down and rest until the oxygen sats came back up. So we were, aside from that and everything else, his food, giving him his meds, it was 24-hour care. And, so Heath was really hurt when he was denied the VA, the caregiver benefits. And he was the epitome of a soldier. He was proud of his service. He would do it. He would have done it all over again, knowing that he was going to be poisoned and die. He was willing to die for his country. But what really, really hurt him was the lack of concern on the Veterans Administration's part, that, they didn't care enough to allow his wife to stay home and take care of him. So she ended up taking an unpaid leave anyway. And Heath passed on May 6th of 2020. And 2 days later, Danielle got a letter from the VA, and it stated that they had convened on May 6th to consider his appeal for the caregiver benefit denial. But while they were in their meeting, they got word that he passed that morning. So they closed his case. And the letter went forward thanking Danielle for taking such good care of their soldier, thanking Heath for his service. And that letter just cut through her like a knife, because, they were thanking her for caring for their soldier. This is her husband. And they denied her the help to care for him. And it really upset her to get that letter. They would have been better off not sending it. But the night he died, and I think you have a picture of that night. Mm-hmm. Danielle held him on her lap for 7 hours without getting up. And we offered, Heath's good friend Candace was there with us. And this was the start of COVID, so we couldn't have much help. And with hospice there, we all had to have face masks and stuff. And we would try to give Danielle something to drink and she would refuse. She goes, no, I don't want to have to go to the bathroom, and I can't get up. And so we adjusted cushions and pillows to try to keep her comfortable, and her legs would fall asleep. And the one time she did get up early on, and I think to go check on Brielle, he became agitated. He didn't want Danielle away from him. So she held him for 7 hours, and I was with my mother when she passed, and it was like she just fell asleep. And the same with my mother-in-law. My sister-in-laws were with her in a hospice facility, and they didn't even know she passed because it was like she just fell asleep. Well, with Heath, it wasn't like that. He was fighting to live. He was suffocating. And he would get up and try to breathe. And, I don't know if anybody knows what it's like to watch someone slowly suffocate for 12 hours and be able to ever get those images and sounds out of their mind. And, that's why I think this hurts so much that, when I heard, like in the round table with the House Veterans Affairs committees that you, Rosie, were part of, when Representative Mike Bost, I think he mentioned 3 or 4 times, so, I support this bill and these veterans and taking care of them, but I don't support the cost it's going to take. And, it's just like a kick in the gut or a kick in the face to all of us that have been through this and have to live with the trauma and get our lives back together and move on and keep this little girl happy. And, it's just a lot.
Incredibly heartbreaking, Susan.
Yeah.
I remember we were privy to a communication circle, and we experienced the video of the passing, and that was a tough moment.
It was.
Yeah.
And when we told Brielle, that baby girl is so traumatized because as much as we tried to shield her for 3 years from his suffering, we couldn't. She found him on the bathroom floor one morning. Danielle and I weren't awake. She came running in my bedroom screaming, "Daddy needs you," and I run downstairs and he's in the bathroom and the whole room is just covered in blood because he was having a nosebleed. And Brielle goes and runs under the dining room table crying. She's scared. Why is this happening to my daddy? And, we told her that Daddy, was in the Army, and when he was fighting the war, he got exposed to things he shouldn't have been exposed to, and they made him sick. The first thing out of Brielle's mouth when we told her, now this little girl was 6 years old, and we told her daddy died, and she just screamed, and she said, "Why did Daddy have to join the Army? I hate the Army," and we don't want Brielle to grow up feeling that way. We want her to be proud that her daddy served her country, but it's going to be a process.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why, like you said, Tim, there's nothing in this for Grunt Style. The money you spent advocating, and that's the way we feel. There's nothing in it for us. Only the justice for the other veterans and getting the help for the other ones. This is, we're going to have the satisfaction that I'm keeping my promise to Heath, which was, he made me promise that I would continue to fight for his comrades that aren't getting the help like he did get from his commanding officers and his unit and his friends at the VA in Columbus, Ohio. That he had some wonderful friends there that did a lot for him, but obviously they can't approve benefits, but they did do a lot for him.
Susan, can I and thank you for sharing that. You know, we've grown as a family of people
Yeah.
affected, and so it's been an honor to be here alongside you and your family. But can we talk about how, you know, Burn Pits 360 connected Danielle with Dr. Miller to do the you know, the process,
The lung autopsy.
the lung autopsy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I very first met you was a congressional briefing in 2017. Well, Dr. Miller was on the panel, and I just, after the briefing, I kind of just, I had no idea what I was doing, because this was only a couple months after Heath was diagnosed. I was just like so naive to everything and uninformed, and I talked to Dr. Miller and told him, well, actually Danielle had called him and to try to set up maybe a
biopsy.
Yeah, and there was nothing Dr. Miller could do, and Heath's records were sent to him, and Dr. Miller said, you know, that the diagnosis was what the oncologist had, and so Dr. Miller, when I met him at the Capitol, remembered that he had spoken with Danielle on the phone, and I asked him, I said, would it be a good idea to have a lung autopsy done when Heath passes? And, you know, that's not an easy thing to ask for. And he said, oh, absolutely, you know, for research purposes. So the morning Heath died, I called Dr. Miller. It was about 8:30 in the morning. I called his office, and they put him right on the phone. And because we needed to have the autopsy coordinated before the funeral home came to get Heath's body, because they couldn't embalm him before that was done. So all those arrangements had to be made, and Dr. Miller got on the phone with Bright State University Medical Center pathologist, and they coordinated everything and took care of everything. And Danielle had to pay $1,800, which I know, Rosie, you set up a fundraiser to reimburse her, which was, thank you again for that. But we were willing to pay that on our own just to get that research out there. And that lung biopsy result showed that Heath also had possibly constrictive bronchiolitis on top of a rare lung cancer. It showed that he did slowly suffocate to die because of the size of the tumors. They were not, they identified a pulmonary fibrosis, interstitial lung disease, but they couldn't define it as constrictive bronchiolitis because his bronchioles were so obliterated by the cancer. And so, you know, there were things going on in his lungs that we didn't know, and neither his physicians knew. And he also had deformed blood vessels. He also had unidentified cells that they don't know what they are. So knowing that, I mean, Dr. Miller told me back in April at our press conference that he spoke at in front of the VFW there, I asked him, and he said, oh, definitely those foreign cells and the deformed blood vessels could very well have been caused by, you know, the toxins he was exposed to.
Wow. Yeah. It's, you know, we every year, Tim, we would we would try to every year host a congressional briefing in DC and just invite members of Congress. And many times families would just randomly show up. Yeah. Well, us with the hopes that families would randomly show up. And that's how I met Susan. And we put together a panel of experts that the DOD and VA, for the most part, would silence, right? And to this day, right? But they're getting better because they've been pressured. So, if it weren't for these types of platforms, we wouldn't be able to extend that outreach like we're doing now. Because we don't know if obviously, there's another Heath out there.
Yeah.
Probably
There's a
going
lot
to,
of Heaths out there.
yeah, right. Lots of Heaths out there. And so for those people out there just wondering, like, what are these symptoms,
I met a gentleman at the Wounded Warrior Conference this week, terminal leukemia.
Right.
Yeah, 30s. Yeah, has you know, not many 35-year-olds or 30-year-olds are walking around with leukemia, right?
Yeah, like Sergeant Wesley Black,
Exactly.
like Heath.
Right. And he's terminal, and he's sitting in that meeting saying, "I know my time is ticking. Like there's no end to the story that is going to be a good ending." How do you live knowing that you're 18 months away from death?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Keith had to do that, and the first time I went to one of his cancer treatments, again because Danielle had to work, someone had to take him. So the first time that I took him and was sitting there with him, and they have a bell. I mean, I wasn't aware of this, but there's a bell, and this little old man walked by and rang this bell, and it was right in front of the cubicle that Heath always selected to sit in for his treatments. And this guy, he rings the bell and he pumps his fist and everybody's applauding. And so I asked Heath, I said, "Well, what's going on with that? What's the deal with that?" And he said, when that's his last cancer treatment. He's beat it. And they ring the bell because they beat cancer. And he said, "That's why I always choose this cubicle, because I enjoy watching the people who have beat cancer." He goes, "Because I'm never going to get to ring that bell. So I love watching everyone else ring it." And I don't know if you remember at his funeral, Rosie, I rang a bell.
Yeah.
For
I
Heath.
remember.
That's why I did it.
And you're such an amazing. Most people thought that Heath. I mean, I know he was a son to you, Susan, but when we've been up on the hill, I said that's his mother-in-law,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The second mom, like that's his mom, and it's so inspiring, right, to see her up on the hill, driving endless hours to now, right?
Yeah.
And this is the unique part of this advocacy effort. It's just a shame, right, that it takes these families to go out in the trenches in order to have Congress act and fulfill their moral obligation.
Yeah.
Like how?
Right.
How is this happening in America's backyard, right? Where we've it sort of feels like for many families like our nation has turned its back on them, and that shouldn't be the case. So
and this poses a question that I've been asking a lot is, we saw this, my generation, we saw this with our parents coming out of Vietnam, living with those, struggling with those Agent Orange exposures, right? I've watched my dad's friend die of that as a young man, right? Luckily, that didn't deter me from joining the military.
Right.
But at some point, Heath's daughter, who's growing up and watching her father die and saying, "I hate the army, I hate the army."
Right.
We are. This is not like to be, bombastic or anything like that, or be trivial. But the idea of being one generation away from being a conscripted military, right? Because we are a volunteer military. People volunteer because of the ideals and the beliefs and the values of this country. If those beliefs and values are not being serviced by the government, who has an obligation to hold those to be true, there's not going to be an agreement. There's not going to be a volunteer army that's going to want to defend the borders and the beliefs of America, right? Because there's no confidence in the government that there's an agreement, and that's a real problem. That's a real question. That's a byproduct of this situation of Vietnam. We can go down the list and all those things that the federal government has been involved in and using military for whatever. But it's a real thing, and it's impacting lives. It's destroying families,
Yep.
and we can do better, right? And that's our challenge to everybody listening, right? Is get involved. Let's show what better looks like. Let's be the change, because the time is right. This generation of the warfighter, the GWAT veteran, is more connected, has more influence than any other veteran group in the history of this country. Right? It's time for us to really gather, organize ourselves, and show them that this is a priority for us. That we are not willing to watch our brothers and sisters die anymore. That we're not going to watch our family members hold their loved ones as they're passing away on the floor of their house. There's no dignity in that.
Yeah.
There's no respect in the warfighter of allowing that to happen.
And Tim, the reason they were on the floor is because the hospice that the VA was contracted with, I don't know if there's some reason, but they were totally inept. And I've dealt with my mother and my mother-in-law, hospices are the most wonderful, wonderful end-of-life facilities. And the hospice was called in probably 30 hours before Danielle started holding him on the floor. At 7 hours after the 7 hours she was holding him, at 3 a.m, they brought a hospital bed. So all that time, like 2 days before, they didn't get the proper equipment there for him. And he was mostly comfortable on the floor because he felt like he could sit up and lean back against the couch. And so at 3 a.m, this man is blowing up with this loud screaming air compressor, an air mattress for a hospital bed, 6 feet from Heath, who is dying. And then the hospice nurse who was there had no idea how to get him into that bed. Fortunately for Danielle, being a physical therapist, she knows how to move patients. And Candace and I and Danielle picked him up and put him in the bed. And, it just the whole experience with the VA and the hospital, that all was horrifying too, and added to our trauma. But I want to go back to one quick little incident that happened with Brielle that you guys are going to love. On Thanksgiving, this past Thanksgiving, we were having Thanksgiving dinner, and the Dallas Cowboy game was about to start. And Heath was a diehard Dallas Cowboy fan. And we are having Thanksgiving dinner, but we had the TV on because the game was getting ready to start. Brielle gets up from the table. They were playing the national anthem, and there were soldiers on the field. And she went and stood in front of the television and saluted
Aw.
through the entire national anthem.
Wow.
And quietly came back and took her seat and continued eating. So she's an amazing kid.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Amazing, right?
That is.
Yeah.
That is. Well, Susan, I appreciate you sharing your story with us. I know it's tough to go through that each time that you have to tell that story, but I think it was. It's very important for our audience to understand that this is just one story of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is happening across our community, and it's not right. We have this opportunity. We can change it. And the time is now. So that's what this program exists for. We're 10 episodes into this. If you find this information interesting, go back and listen to the previous 9. You can get those downloads at any app download store. I don't know where you
Right.
say that, but
Apple.
Apple and where you find your podcasts. Gaslighting the Warfighter. There's a lot of great information in previous episodes, and we will continue to bring information to you guys. And I have to say, unfortunately, we will continue to bring these heartbreaking stories. And
Definitely.
we hope that you share these stories with your friends and the people that you know that might find them important or might find them useful in the situation that they're dealing with, because that's what this is for, again. And Susan, I appreciate everything that you do. I look forward to seeing you the next time on the Hill, and we'll continue to drive this issue to the finish line.
Yeah,
Continue to yell at congressmen and women.
That's right. That's right. You and I were going back and forth on a Twitter conversation, and
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting, right? There's some heat going on out there, and I'd asked the question, would President Biden's son Beau be happy with the way that his father has been handling this opportunity to close the book on this situation?
Right.
And I challenge that, and I don't know the man personally, but I don't think Beau would be happy on the way that this is shaking out. But we got into a little bit of a Twitter spat with an individual, and they're just trying to draw down a party line. And this is not a party line issue.
Right.
I'll scream at a Republican, I'll scream at a Democrat, I'll scream at an independent,
That's
I'll
right.
scream at a progressive, a conservative. I don't care who's
That's
on the
right.
receiving end of someone being a jackass to a wonderful lady like this who is obviously affected by some traumatic events that they have the opportunity of solving the problem for. So
Right.
that does not fly, right?
And what set me off that day was I walked over and I was holding that poster up with Heath's picture and Brielle holding Heath's casket flag. And I thought, and I believe Senator Gillibrand was just beginning to speak because it was right during that press conference. And I thought, I saw John Field was trying to get their attention and no one was reacting. And I thought, if I take this poster over there, they're not going to walk by and ignore a picture of a little girl holding her daddy's casket flag. And and I thought, especially the women, the mothers, and I got some, and I said, hey, please stop for a second. I had postcards ready to just hand them. They didn't even have to stop for more than 2 seconds, with the information while we were at the press conference. And I got they'd look and go, no, or just turn away, walk by me and totally turn their head so they didn't have to look. Well, then one, and I know who it was, and he's a congressman in Ohio, and he's not mine, but he's very near my district. And he yelled freedom at me and laughed in my face. And that's what set me off when that happened, because I'm like, my hair's on fire. My hair's on fire. Our soldiers' hair's on fire. Come on, Congress. Do you see us over here with our hair on fire? Come over here and put it out. And I'm thinking, why wouldn't anybody do that? And, that's the way I feel. Why isn't everybody rushing to us to help us? And, when that happened, boy, that was it. All bets were off. I didn't care if the police arrested me. They did converge. And then, Tim, you came over to help me. Joe McCain came over and was like standing guard over me.
Oh.
But I was just furious. And granted, this was just a few months after Heath died. I was still in some stages of grief there, and to have a member of Congress just disrespect me that way, and I'm wearing an Army jacket, so if they didn't know what our deal was there that day, it was clearly obvious it was veteran related. You had all the BFW hats. You had other people there in military gear. There was no excuse for that.
Yeah.
And I think that brings me back to the point, Tim, that right now in the moment of history, on this issue, you have the Healthcare for Burn Pits Veterans Act, S3541, which is basically just an expansion of healthcare. And then you have the Honoring Our Pact Act, HR 3967. And it's so important that people understand the difference.
Yep.
The Senate bill for healthcare for veterans, the Burn Pit Veterans Act, that does not grant presumption.
Right.
If they pass that and they don't pass the PACT Act, which includes 24 presumption illnesses, including cancers, then that will be their tactic to say, well, we've done something, like they did with the Burn Pit Registry. Right. So for years, they had something to lean on as a talking point. And so if that bill passes, you can say goodbye to all those presumptions, and the burden of proof will still be on the veteran, on the survivor, widow.
Yeah, but I guess there is a windfall for all the people that are eager to do more data.
Right.
research, right?
Yeah.
But we need to do more research. More
No,
research.
inhaling
Speaking
toxins.
of data, there's a deodorant recall right now on a men's deodorant and women's deodorant because there's benzene, cancer-causing benzene. So, but the VA and the DOD say, "Oh, we don't know if benzene causes cancer."
Right.
But in deodorant, it does. It doesn't if it's in burn pit smoke, but if it's in deodorant,
Yeah,
it
it's
causes
okay.
cancer.
It's
Yeah. And you know, this past week, you know, some of our Ohio advocates, which are on Michigan advocates, who are all veterans affected with constrictive bronchiolitis, have done Zoom meetings trying to, you know, drum up more support for the PACT Act vote next week. And in one of the meetings, we were explaining the differences in the two bills that you just explained, Rosie. And one thing I pointed out was, and Paul McMillan pointed out, was the 3 veterans in that meeting will not be covered by that Senate healthcare beyond 10 years.
Right. And that's the trap here, right? You know, and I think that's very important is, you know, the S3541, there is a time limit, right? They are gracious enough to extend it from 5 to 10 years, but the latency on this is 10 to 15 years.
Right.
So,
or even more.
Yeah, exactly.
Heath was 10 years. If Heath had not opted to be employed by the National Guard, he wouldn't have been covered.
Yeah.
He was out in 2007.
Right.
He was beyond 10 years.
Absolutely. Well, we have some work to do, ladies and gentlemen, and you know, there's a vote coming up on HR 3967, and it could be as early as next week. So make sure you are getting yourself familiarized and read it yourself. HR 3967, the Honoring Our PACT bill, that grants presumptions, and then the S3541, which expands healthcare with some strings. So do the research yourself. Come to your own conclusions. But you know, again, there are some bills that are out there that are addressing the subject. It's just a matter of which one are we going to get, and which one is going to benefit the community versus the machine. Right? That's the best way of looking at it. So that's gonna wrap it up for us here on Gaslighting the Warfighter. Susan, I want to thank you very much for again sharing your story. You're an incredible human. You're an incredible American. And, you know, I think Heath would be very proud of the work that you're continuing to do in his name. And I'm proud to.
I know he is.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosie. Hopefully I'll see you in a few days. And Tim, I look forward to seeing you again on Capitol Hill, and we make a good team.
Yes, ma'am. You know it.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Check out the previous episodes on any of your favorite platforms to download podcasts, and we'll see you again in exactly 30 days. Would you like to say goodbye, Rosie?
Yeah. And one last thing, Tim, is just if people want to know more on the details of this bill, which was basically the Warfighter bill, they can go to warfighter2021.com. And then for any more information, they can visit burnpit360.org.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.